You get a large array of notes for a little amount of work. And if you're lazy like me, that's awesome. Is there such a thing as a magical arpeggio? Let's find out. Today we're going to work on these arpeggios, which you can learn one little shape and you can transfer it across a lot of the fretboard and move up and down pretty quickly. Alright, cool. Hello, my name's Darryl Powis. Today we're going to be taking a look at these, what I call diagonal arpeggios. And I think they're great because all you have to do is learn a small area of the fretboard over 2 strings and you can move it across the whole fretboard. If you've seen my video on the magic of diagonal scales, you'll like this because it all links in the same kind of stuff that you did in that video too. So first thing we need to do is we need to take a look at what's going to happen and talk about the fundamentals here. The basic idea with this is you learn one pattern over 2 strings for an arpeggio. So if we start with our major arpeggio, and it's useful to know a little bit about your scales here to know how these fit together. So a triad arpeggio, like a major or a minor or a diminished arpeggio, they're made up of 3 notes. And if you know how those 3 notes go together, your life is a lot easier. So the major arpeggio is made up of notes 1, 3, and 5 of the major scale. So if I take note 1 of A major, so that's my root, the naming note of this chord for playing an A major chord. And then I want to take my 3rd, which is a C sharp in this case. You don't need to know it's a C sharp, you just need to know that it's up 4 frets from the root. And then I take my 5th, which is an E, all the way up there, but I'm going to put it on the next string, then I've got a shape. And I could play this 2 ways. I could play it like I am there, where I'm using my pinky and I've got a bit of a stretch, or I could put the C sharp already on string 5. They're both the same. But we've got a root, then we've got a 3rd and a 5th. So whatever way you want to play it, I'd actually practice doing both because both are going to be useful as we go through the different kind of chords that I've got here. And we're starting with some simple triads, but by the end I'll show you how you can do this for some fancy stuff. We'll do like a major 7 sus2. Now I've said it, we're going to do it. Major 7 sus2 later on. But we've got those 2. Now all we do, once we can play it over 2 strings, is if we know where our root note is, and we know the shape that we're playing, we're going to follow that root note up the neck. So if I do, then that's root 3, 5, find my next root, so A, I've got another A here, and then I've got another A up here, and I follow that same shape, and then come back, so it's the same notes. Same thing. A major. So A major chord comes up. And you could do the same thing over a D major chord, you just need to know where that root note is. Back to A. Cool. So that's cool, and that will work for any major chord, anywhere on the guitar. So if we did F, B, C double sharp, which you will hopefully come across very rarely in your life, anything would work with a major chord on this here. So that's great. However, music is not just made up of major chords. We have other chords too. So the principle here is always, as long as you can play it over 2 strings, you can play it over all 6 strings. Let's take a look at this using minor chords. So the difference between a major and a minor chord, or even a major and a minor chord, is just one note. It's the third. The third is 1 fret lower. So that's the sound of our A major. The first and the last note I play stay the same place. That middle note changes. And if I play it, so I'm going A, C, E now, ace. Notes in an A minor chord is spelled out ace. And now I'd have a bigger stretch this way if I wanted to do it with this stretch. Now I just expand that over to each of my root notes. Oh. Now I just expand that to over each of my root notes. And I can play it over any A minor chord. So I can play that A minor arpeggio over any A minor chord that comes up. Okay, so it's a pretty easy way to traverse the fretboard because you've only got to learn over 2 strings and then you kind of all go away with it. There's all sorts of other arpeggios you can learn all over the guitar, but you tend to end up with one shape for one area. So I like this because you end up using quite a lot of the fretboard. You get a large array of notes for a little amount of work. And if you're lazy like me, that's awesome. So that minor one, in the same way, we can play this over any minor chord that comes up. So let's try E minor, for instance. As long as I can find my root note, which here would be on the 12th fret. So it works over A minor, but we can also use it over any minor chord anywhere. So if you're in a song and E minor comes up, as long as you know where the root note is, you can play over it. If it goes back to A minor, as long as you know where that root note is, you can play over it. All right, and that goes for any chord that comes up. So your C minors, your B minors, etc. All right, so those are our basic kind of normal triads that we end up using in most songs. What happens if we want to do some sevenths? Or we want to do some even more expensive chords beyond the seventh? Well, let's take a look at sevenths first of all. So, as always, knowing your chord construction is really helpful here. So if we know a major seventh, first of all, a major 7 chord it's a major triad with a particular kind of seventh, and that seventh it's a note which is 1 fret below the root. So we had this. And typically, if we were going to build this arpeggio normally, we'd go continue up. It's that sound. Okay. But there, what's happened when I played that, I haven't actually played that over 2 strings. I've played that over 3 strings. Because I've crossed strings there. So I could add something in on this string. And you totally could do that over the strings if you want to tap this. That's a cool way of doing it. I think someone in my last video was talking about tapping for this, and I think Guthrie Govan, really very good guitar player, does a lot of this kind of movement with his playing too, I've seen. However, rather than adding those taps in, you could just put your 7th in, because it's an arpeggio. We don't have to have them all in order. Obviously, we can know the theory in order, but we can play the notes in any order we want. So I can just put the 7th in as the first note of this arpeggio, and then I go 7, root, 3, 5. And we've got all of our notes in there. Okay, So that's for our major 7. Now our dominant 7 chord, and just like before, any major 7 chord that comes up, you can play that over it. So if I do an example over D major, you can use that over any major 7 chord that comes up. Now, dominant 7 chord. What happens if we have a dominant 7 chord? What if we're playing the blues and we want to do something over the E7 chord at the end, or we want to be able to do something? You can use this arpeggio for that. So our dominant 7 chord is similar to the major 7 chord in that it has a major triad in it. So we've got 1, 3, 5 look like this. However, our 7th, instead of being 1 fret below the root, is actually 2 frets below the root. And so in this case, instead of a G sharp, which was that's our major 7, listen to the difference. That's our dominant 7, that has a G note in it. So the pattern looks like this. And that works over any dominant 7 chord. So if you're playing the blues, you can use that as a way of navigating over some of those dominant 7 chords. It's a perfectly fine way to look at a chord and go, I've got an arpeggio here that I can use. All right, so that's our dominant 7th chord. Now minor 7, this is the last kind of 7th chord we're going to do. That's a minor triad with a minor 7th. So it's this one here. We've got root 3 and 5, A, C, and E. And then we've got 2 frets below, G, A, for our 7th. So it looks like this. Okay, cool. So that's all our kind of 7th arpeggios looked at. There are more 7th arpeggios. There are even more triads, but you're not going to use them as much as these ones. Now, what if we have something expensive? What if we have a chord where we're like, I want to do a pretty version of this really kind of nice chord that's come up. I want an arpeggio to play over it. Well, all you need to know is what are the notes in that chord, and then you need to arrange them over 2 strings. So I think I said earlier on, what if we had a major 7 sus2? So what would a major 7 sus2 sound like? Well, let's see if we can play the chord first of all. So if I have this here, tense is how it sounds, because we've got no 3rd in there. So the major 7 would be this, but we've got a note, we've got a sus2 in there, which means the 3rd's been taken out and a 2nd has been added. So in A, we've removed the C sharp and we've made it a B. Very tense is how that sounds. Now to mimic that, all we have to do is find a way of playing 7 root, and then we need 2, 5. So as long as we can find those notes over 2 strings, it's going to be fine. So in this case, we've got the major 7 and the root, and then I need a 2 instead of my normal 3. So it's a bit far to go for my 2 on string 5. That's quite far away. It's a bit of a stretch. So I'll probably end up playing 3 notes on one string, and then my 5th on the other string. Cool. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you can see how these diagonal arpeggios can really get you out of a bit of a rut or a bit of a problem if you're stuck with a chord in front of you that you don't know how to play, and you've got a jam session coming up and you're not sure what to play over that as an arpeggio for your soloing. So this can really be a kind of get out of jail free card for arpeggios and sometimes soloing on the guitar. Hope you found it helpful. If you like this, then subscribe. Why are you not subscribed to me already? That would be awesome. And I'll see you next week. I do videos every Saturday on the fretboard, See you then. Thanks, guys.